The sound of hoofbeats thundered across the plains as the first golden rays of dawn pierced the horizon. 200 mounted figures appeared like shadows against the morning sky, their forms silhouetted by the rising sun. Their faces painted with ceremonial markings, feathers and ornaments adorning their hair. They moved in silent formation toward the small homestead where Mary Ellen Parker stood alone on the porch, her thin frame barely casting a shadow. Behind her, only a rickety door separated her from the orphanage she called home. The leader raised his hand, and the massive formation halted in perfect unison. The dust clouds settled around them as an eerie silence fell across the plains. Mary Ellen clutched the doorframe, her knuckles white. She was just 12 years old, but her eyes held the weariness of someone who had seen far too much of life's cruelties. But what happened next would silence the entire valley. Just 24 hours earlier, Mary Ellen had been performing her daily chores at Widow Thompson's orphanage for displaced children. The drought had been merciless that summer, turning the once fertile soil to dust and dwindling their already meager supplies. The orphanage housed 14 children, most left parentless by disease, accidents in the mines, or the constant skirmishes with native tribes that punctuated life on the frontier. Mary Ellen scrubbed the wooden floor with such vigor that her knuckles bled, but she didn't stop. Work was the only thing that kept her mind from dwelling on her emptiness. 3 years had passed since the fever took both her parents within days of each other. With no relatives to claim her, she had ended up at Widow Thompson's, a place that provided shelter but little comfort. "Girl, are you deaf?" Widow Thompson's sharp voice cut through her thoughts. The woman stood in the doorway, her tall frame blocking the light, a basket clutched in her bony hands. "It's distribution day. Come get your ration before I change my mind." Mary Ellen quickly dried her hands on her tattered apron and hurried over. Distribution day came once a week, and for many of the children, it was the only day they received anything resembling a decent meal. Mary accepted her portion, a small loaf of bread, barely larger than her palm, and a thin slice of salted pork. It would have to last her 3 days. "Thank you, ma'am," she whispered, clutching the precious food to her chest. Widow Thompson sniffed disapprovingly. "Don't thank me. Thank the good Christian folk in town who waste their charity on feeding ungrateful orphans instead of building a proper church." She turned and walked away, her keys jangling at her waist like a jailer's. Mary Ellen tucked the pork into her pocket for later and took her bread to the small creek behind the orphanage. It was the only place she could find a moment's peace. She settled on a flat rock, her bare feet dangling in the cool water, and broke off a small piece of bread. Her stomach growled painfully, but she ate slowly, savoring each morsel. That's when she heard it, a soft whimpering coming from the thicket of bushes across the narrow creek. Mary Ellen froze, the bread halfway to her mouth. The whimpering came again, followed by a child's sob. Cautiously, she stood and peered across the water. The bushes rustled, and a small face appeared. A native child, a girl, no more than 5 or 6 years old. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears, her dark eyes wide with fear and hunger. A nasty cut ran across her forehead, crusted with dried blood. Mary Ellen's heart constricted. Everyone knew about the tensions between the settlers and the native tribes. Just last month, a family on the outskirts of town had been killed in a raid. The town marshal had organized a retaliatory attack, and rumors circulated about a massacre at a native encampment. Since then, fear and hatred had only intensified on both sides. The little girl's eyes fixed on the bread in Mary Ellen's hand. She made no move to cross the creek, but her gaze was unmistakable. the universal look of a hungry child. Mary Ellen glanced back toward the orphanage. Widow Thompson's rules were clear. Any child caught interacting with savages would be whipped and denied food for 3 days. The memory of the last orphan who had broken this rule made Mary Ellen shudder. Poor Thomas had barely survived his punishment. But when she looked back at the native child, something inside her shifted. Hunger was hunger, fear was fear, regardless of which side of the creek you stood on. Without allowing herself another thought, Mary Ellen broke her precious bread in half. She stepped carefully across the creek's stones and extended her hand toward the child, offering the larger portion of her meager meal. The native girl hesitated, her eyes darting from Mary Ellen's face to the bread and back again. Then, slowly, she reached out and took it. Their fingers brushed briefly, and Mary Ellen felt a strange connection pass between them. 2 orphans in a world that had no place for either. The child devoured the bread in seconds, watching Mary Ellen warily the entire time. When she finished, she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and suddenly reached for something tied at her waist, a small pouch made of deerskin. From it, she withdrew a tiny carved wooden bird, offering it to Mary Ellen with a solemn nod. "Thank you," Mary Ellen whispered, accepting the gift. "Are you lost? Where's your family?" The girl didn't respond, but pointed at the cut on her forehead and then gestured vaguely to the distant hills. Mary Ellen understood. "You're hurt. You got separated." She pointed to herself. "I'm Mary Ellen." The girl touched her own chest. "Kimmy," she said softly. Footsteps and angry voices suddenly came from the direction of the orphanage. The native child's eyes widened in terror. Mary Ellen hurriedly crossed back over the creek and shoved the wooden bird into her pocket just as 2 older boys from town emerged through the trees. "Hey, orphan girl," called the taller one, Jeb Miller, the blacksmith's son. "Who were you talking to?" "No one," Mary Ellen replied, her heart pounding. "Just myself." Jeb's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Pa says there's savages hiding in these parts after what they did to the Hendersons. If you're harboring one, you'll swing alongside 'em." "I said I was alone," Mary Ellen insisted, her voice steadier than she felt. The boys eventually lost interest and wandered away, but Mary Ellen knew she had taken a terrible risk. For the rest of the day, she couldn't stop thinking about Kimmy, wondering if she would find her way back to her people, if the wound on her head would fester, if she would find anything else to eat. That night, she lay on her thin mattress, listening to the breathing of the other orphan girls. Mary Ellen clutched the wooden bird in her palm. It was the first gift she'd received since her parents died. She was awakened before dawn by shouts and the sound of horses. Mary Ellen rushed to the window along with the other children. In the gray pre-dawn light, they could see riders approaching, not settlers, but warriors from the native tribe that controlled the territories beyond the hills. Their painted faces and feathered regalia were unmistakable, even in the dim light. "They're coming to kill us all!" cried one of the younger boys, dissolving into tears. Widow Thompson burst into the dormitory, her face ashen. "Everyone, hide in the root cellar, now!" But as the children scrambled to obey, Mary Ellen remained at the window, transfixed. Among the riders, seated in front of a warrior on his horse, was a small figure she recognized, Kimmy. Without fully understanding her own actions, Mary Ellen turned and ran outside, ignoring Widow Thompson's shrieks to come back. She stepped onto the porch just as the riders formed a semicircle around the orphanage, their expressions unreadable in the growing light. And that's where she stood now, as the sun broke over the horizon and illuminated the scene in golden light. 200 elders and warriors, their presence both magnificent and terrifying, facing a solitary orphan girl on a weathered porch. The leader, an imposing man with gray streaks in his long black hair and a face lined with wisdom and hardship, dismounted and approached. In his hands, he carried a bundle wrapped in beautifully tanned deerskin. "You," he said, in accented English, "gave bread to Kimmy." It wasn't a question. Mary Ellen swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." A murmur ran through the assembled tribe. From behind the leader, Kimmy peeked out, her wound now cleaned and dressed, and offered Mary Ellen a shy smile. "The child told us a pale orphan with hair like autumn leaves shared her only food," the leader continued. "She said this orphan showed kindness when others show only hatred." Mary Ellen stood straighter, though her legs trembled beneath her dress. She was hungry. I was hungry too. It seemed right. By now, Widow Thompson and the other children had emerged from the orphanage, watching the exchange in stunned silence. Several men from town had arrived, rifles at the ready, but hesitated at the sight of the overwhelming number of natives. The town marshal pushed his way forward. "What's the meaning of this? You people have no business here." The tribal leader didn't even glance in his direction. His focus remained entirely on Mary Ellen. "My granddaughter was separated from our hunting party. She hid for 2 days, afraid of your people who had killed so many of ours. She would have died if not for you." He unwrapped the bundle in his hands. "These are for you, brave one with the kind heart. My people honor those who show mercy to the vulnerable, even at great risk to themselves." Mary Ellen stared at the gifts in disbelief. I can't accept these. I only gave her half my bread." A woman stepped forward, her bearing regal and her eyes gentle. "You gave her half of all you had," she said, her English clearer than the leader's. "Our ways teach that such generosity creates a sacred bond. You are now sister to Kimi, and therefore daughter to our tribe." The marshal sputtered in outrage. "This is absurd. The girl belongs at the orphanage until she's old enough to work as a proper servant. You can't claim her." "We do not claim her," the woman replied calmly. "We honor her. There is a difference your people seem unable to grasp." Widow Thompson, seeing an opportunity, pushed Mary Ellen forward. "Take her then, one less mouth to feed. Good riddance to bad rubbish, I say." Mary Ellen felt her cheeks burn with shame, but the tribal leader seemed unperturbed. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "The choice is yours, brave one. You may come with us and learn our ways, or stay among your own people. But know this, from this day forward, you have the protection of the Lakota. This mark," he drew a symbol in the air, "will be known to all our allies. You will never be without family again." For a moment, Mary Ellen couldn't speak. She looked back at the orphanage, at the place that had never been home. She looked at the townspeople, whose charity had always come with conditions and judgment. Then she looked at Kimmy, who stepped forward and took her hand. "Sister," Kimmy said simply. In that moment, something settled in Mary Ellen's heart, a certainty she hadn't felt since before her parents died. She straightened her shoulders and faced the tribal leader. "I would be honored to learn your ways," she said, her voice clear and strong. "But I ask one thing, that I might sometimes return to teach the other orphans what I learn. They are alone, as I was." The leader studied her face, then nodded solemnly. "Wisdom beyond your years, so it shall be." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the townsfolk watched in amazement as Mary Ellen was lifted onto a horse, seated before the tribal leader's wife. Kimmy rode nearby, beaming with pride at her new sister. The marshal spat on the ground. She's turned her back on her own kind, disgraceful. But old Doc Williams, who had stood silently observing, shook his head. No, she's done something far braver. She's built a bridge where we've only built walls. He looked pointedly at the armed men. Perhaps we could learn something from a child who saw hunger instead of difference. As the procession of riders turned to leave, Mary Ellen looked back once at the orphanage. She clutched the wooden bird in one hand and waved with the other. The other orphans waved back, their faces a mixture of awe and wistful longing. Years later, Mary Ellen would fulfill her promise, returning regularly to both the orphanage and the town as an emissary of peace between two worlds. The wooden bird she received became a symbol of an unexpected bond formed that day, a reminder that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can ripple outward to change countless lives. For in a land torn by conflict, it was the simple compassion of a hungry orphan sharing her bread that began the long, difficult path toward mutual understanding. The courage to see humanity in the eyes of a stranger may be the rarest courage of all. Would you have had the courage to share your last meal with someone you were taught to fear? Tell us in the comments. When faced with a choice between safety and compassion, which path would you choose?